Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Career Club LinkedIn Live podcast. We are so happy that you've taken a few minutes to join us today. I'm Bob Goodwin. I'm the founder of Career Club. And if you're not familiar with Career Club, we were founded using proven sales methodologies and technology to help our clients find a career that matters. So you're welcome to check us out a little bit more at career.club. So this is an interactive session, as I think you guys know if you've been on a live broadcast before. And so please use the chat feature. We would love to hear from you. And even starting off, you just want to tell us where you're listening in from today. That would be great. But I'm really happy today to welcome a friend of mine and a really talented career coach, Susan Barbee with Grow Forward Coaching. I met Susan maybe 2 years ago. Another mutual friend of ours, Eric Kershott, who is the disc nerd in Chicago, just one of the most respected HR professionals I know. I was asking Eric, who is the best career coach he knows? He's like, oh, that's easy. That's Susan Barbee. I'm like, would you please make me the introduction? And so was very, very happy to begin to get to know Susan. So Susan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Bob.
It's great to have you. And where are you based, Susan?
Yeah, so I'm based in the north suburbs of Chicago, where I grew up, and I've lived here much of my life. I'm just so happy to be here today, Bob. This is great.
No, it's great. So Susan, like I said, we've gotten to know each other over the past couple of years, and I thought maybe we could just do kind of a few little quick icebreaker questions, what we like to call Rocks Fab Five, so that our audience can get to know you a little bit as well, if that'd be okay.
Yes, that'd be great.
Cool. So where were you born and raised, Susan? Where'd you grow up?
So I was actually born in Waukegan, Illinois, where Jack Benny also was born. And for the most part, I grew up and was raised in Illinois, so the northern suburbs where I still live today. So I'm really a Midwestern girl at heart.
You are a Midwest girl all the way, yeah. Yes. And then where'd you go to school?
So I kind of use school as a way to just, explore different parts of the country, I think. And so I went to Earlham College in Indiana. That was a very small school. And then I leaped over to Boston and went to Boston University for something a little different.
Well, cool. Well, I just learned something. So we'll talk Earlham on another day because I've got a friend that's an alum there. Yeah. And then a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so my family, I'm thinking my original family, kind of interesting. My father became a minister at 16 and was one of those tent preachers down there with Billy Graham in the South. So that led him, to an interesting beginning, but eventually he got his own churches. And so we ended up moving about every 4 years, but typically would stay in the suburbs of Chicago again. So that was my background. And I think it's actually led to some of my career choices, but that's for another day.
Oh, but you're a preacher's kid.
Yeah, I am.
Awesome. Very cool. And then just a little bit about your career background.
Yeah. So actually, when I was thinking about our session today, my career background is actually about pivots. And so it very much is applicable today. So I started out, actually as a bargain shopping entrepreneur. And I used to joke that I had a BS in bargain shopping. And part of what I did was to write a book. And that actually led me to a career over 20 years in publishing. And so when I was thinking again about today, that was the only time I could really say that I fell into a career. And after that, it became more of an intentional pivot. And so, and the reason is because when I decided to get out of publishing because the field was, falling apart and really changing, I think as we're all aware, I had to go, oh my gosh, now what I do? I was full of trepidation and fear because it had to be not only a different role, but in a completely different field and industry. So that led me to a career coach where I was able to do this deep dive self-discovery work to really understand what's behind my successes so that I can translate them to a whole different area. So that really helped me to see what it takes to pivot. You could do a slight pivot or a very more significant reinvention.
Yep.
And then the last thing that brings me to where I am today, which is I went from HR after about 7 or 8 years, and decided to finally be who I really think I always have been, which is working with people one-on-one or in groups. And so that's now a career and professional development coach. So just another
Mm.
note on the pivoting piece. What I learned there was everything I had learned going to make the first pivot was completely at my disposal as tools and insights and understanding about myself and how to
Mm.
make the pivot from the first time around. So I think that's really exciting to really know that whatever work you do in this pivot you might be going through today for people with us is something that you're going to be able to learn from and use going forward as well.
No, that's awesome. And obviously we are going to talk a ton more about pivoting here in a few minutes, but it's nice to kind of see, as you say, just sort of that theme, kind of create your career arc,
Yeah.
right? And just some of the tools, the techniques you were talking about to help people kind of understand, how that can work for them as well. Everybody has a unique story to tell,
Yes.
right? And so I'm looking forward to our conversation. Last question in Rock's Fab Five. What do you like to do when you're not doing all this cool pivoting and helping people with their career stuff?
So when I'm not helping people pivot, I am probably reverting to my introverted self. And so I love to do quiet things like garden, walk, read, and sometimes watch, that occasional movie. But that's mostly how I spend my free time.
Awesome. And I see some of our friends on here. We've got David calling in from Washington. Hey, David. There's Eugenia, Adrienne, Julia. Wow, that's awesome. Hey, Scott. So great to see some of our friends on the call with us. And again, you guys, seriously, what I love about this format is I'm just having a Zoom call with Susan like we do periodically and just talking about topics of mutual interest. And I'm really pleased that folks can dial in and sort of participate. So if you've got questions, comments as we go. I failed to mention that my colleague Heather, who's really the puppet master here, is in the background and can certainly help make sure that we don't miss some of the questions or comments that you guys might have. So our topic today, picking up on pivoting, is pivoting through reinvention. And one of the things that we have talked about previously, Susan, is where the pandemic has just obviously jolted people to kind of say, wait a minute, what's my life about? What's important to me? We've done a series on LinkedIn talking about convictions, and where the pandemic really sort of shone light on people like, well, wait a minute, maybe I don't want to commute 3 hours a day. Maybe I don't like working in this kind of environment. Maybe this isn't the kind of work that makes me happy or gives me joy. And so there's been a lot of factors that have kind of gone in to people really doing a reassessment. The Wall Street Journal or whatever you're reading, will talk about the Great Resignation. And I think you had a good spin on this, talking about the Great Reinvention. I was wondering if you could maybe kind of talk a little bit about what you're seeing.
Yeah. So when we were thinking about our session today, or when I was thinking, yes, people are leaving their jobs, but probably just as many, if not more people, are wondering about, is there something else for me? And so that's when we started thinking about really the focus is on reinvention. And so what is behind it, or things that you're saying is, we were displaced, have been displaced at some extent. And so I think a lot of people are emerging with a new mindset. What do I really had a time to walk away, or I really enjoyed the more seamless experience of work, life. I could just run out and walk my dog or do some errands during the day. So whatever it is, I think it's really kind of an exciting time too. It can be scary, but I think both are actually happening and make sense. And so what are we looking for, and how can we always at the core of it grow into our next role, grow forward in whatever it is that's on our minds today?
Yeah, and obviously that's the name of your consulting practice, is Grow Forward Coaching, and we are going to talk a bit here about growing forward as we kind of get into the why and the how of helping people sort of take a step back and reassess. Like, okay, that all makes sense. I kind of get the problem statement piece of this, and we're going to talk also about, some of the solution pieces here. But, when you talk about a career pivot, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so a career pivot can be, we think pivot, we probably first think of something kind of simple. You want to stay in the same swim lane perhaps, but you want to shift to a role that's different, maybe a field, industry, or maybe you're
Mhm.
just looking for a different kind of company. So at first that comes to mind, but for some people it might really be more of a reinvention. So whatever level it is, you're looking to make a change where you can draw upon hopefully some of your proven expertise and value that you've worked hard to gain. So that's what comes to my mind. I don't know about you, Bob. What do you think?
Well, I mean, sometimes we're forced into this, right? Like in industry, you were talking about publishing earlier, right?
Yes.
And publishing obviously is really, really different, or the music business is really different than the way it used to be because technology has forced things. And oftentimes we get very specific about industries, and which to me is kind of vertical, you know, and don't always look at kind of more horizontally. What
Mhm.
are the transferable skills, that I might bring to different industries? They might use different vocabulary. The process might be a little bit different in different industries. Um, but being able to kind of find adjacencies to things that I was doing before. You come from, again, publishing. Well, then a lot about writing, and so how did you kind of use that to inform like a next step? But there's always typically there's some you know connective tissue, right? And that people don't just make these radical jumps from, I went from being a chef to an astronaut. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And that I love that because the connective tissue is what you really wanna be looking for, if possible. And even if it
Mhm.
is a major shift, because I did actually leap from publishing to HR, there wasn't too much in common. Would I recommend that to others? I say it's very hard to do. Can you do it? Yes. But I love the idea of connective tissue because that's gonna make a more, seamless, easier, change. And so starting all over versus just reinvention is really something that's important to consider because what is the cost if you leave it all behind and don't have a lot of connectivity between the two? So that horizontal, aspect you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot when I'm talking with people. Look, I think experience would show that employers really care that you know something about their industry. It's typically the number one filter. Like, well, do you already come from the insights industry? Do you already come from consumer packaged goods? Do you already come from financial services, whatever it is? Because hiring by its definition is a risky business, right? They're hiring somebody hoping that it works out for them. Now, I think it's also true on the talent side. We're also hoping that the job works out and the company works out and it's all good for us. But from the employer side, since they're the ones making the offer, they need to have some sense that it's not a giant leap of faith that you can just completely move from here to there. I had a client back in the spring, and his resume was a lot of retail and supply chain and retail, and he now works for a commercial real estate company. Those are like really different.
Yeah.
And in that case, he was able to make the pivot because the owner of the commercial real estate company knew him, right? And identified him process and problem solving skills that he saw the need for in his business. But what made that work for him was there was a trust. He knew the individual. And so when the CEO of this real estate company hired my client, it wasn't because he had this deep real estate experience. It was those, what the CEO perceived to be those transferable skills, right, around process improvement and problem solving, which is what he saw his biggest needs being. But again, the connective tissue in that one was actually trust because there was already a personal relationship established. In the situations where there's not that pre-existing trust, then this need for connective tissue, because it gives the employer comfort that there's some kind of a segue between what you were doing and what they're looking to get done. Does that make
Yes.
sense?
It does. Let me just add, and I know you're not going to disagree with this, is that okay? The people you already know in your network, those are great places to start because they're going to look beyond the keywords. Oh,
Yeah.
you don't have my industry experience, but they trust, like you say, that person that they have the skills. Those are sometimes we just call those the transferable skills that you can carry to the next role. And the important thing there is to be able to tell that story clearly so that they're not going to know that unless you know that. So that
Well,
would be my first comment to you. But the other one is sometimes you don't know those people, or the people that you do know aren't going to be the ones that can give you access to that, hiring manager or the person with the influence in a new field or role that you might not qualify for on paper. So that's where the whole networking piece comes in. And I think we'll be talking about that a little bit later today together as we kind of work through the stages of making a transition. But that's so important too. So everything you're saying and more.
yeah. So one of the things where I find clients and like to hear if you see the same thing is sometimes you've got folks that have been doing manufacturing or whatever, and particularly for mid or later stage professionals, like, I just want to do something new. I want to do something different. And part of me applauds that. I'm like, good, that's awesome. That means you want to continue to grow and try new things. But how do you, and if this comes up later, we can table it, but how do you coach somebody like, hey, you want to go from manufacturing to nonprofit, or just like something that's a pretty big leap, where they want to make a change and they think change sounds fun. They want variety. They're looking for something new. So they kind of come into it with a pivot mindset.
Yeah.
How would you start to talk to that person?
Yes. So a lot of the things that we've already touched upon really become very important. And that gets a little bit into the how.
Okay.
And essentially, though, it's really starting at the top is, are they ready to do a little more light work there to make that change? Again, I know what that's like personally, and it isn't always easy. And there are some things that what's the cost here to look at? I would want to have that first conversation because sometimes if you're really changing that dramatically, you might have to give up seniority. You might even have to give up some financial security if you're not able to go in at the same level that you've already been at. And that's a reality factor that's important to really look at because you're not going to be seen as somebody who already has that depth of experience and expertise right away. Even if they say,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll hire you because I see that you can do problem solving no matter what. You're analytical, you can think on your feet and figure it out. That's the kind of person we want. But you still might not be able to go in at the same level. And I think that's really an important, thing to look at.
Well, that's interesting because we had talked about like convictions and what's important to you in your career,
Yeah.
and for some people, it's maybe stops becoming so much about title, or even income. And I'm not trying to dial down people's expectations or their earnings, but part of this reinvention is, hey, like, I don't want to be just about my job. Like, I could have a bigger title and make more money, but that starts to crowd out other parts of my life that are actually has shown me is more important. I actually like having dinner with my family. I like being home when my daughter comes home from school or whatever, right? I
Yeah.
like having time, like you said, to go take a walk, not
Yeah.
just be in an office all day. So, people are making trade-offs,
Right.
and kind of reassessing what the most important things are to them.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, we've kind of talked about why people are doing this. We've talked a little bit about, what it means to, kind of reinvent yourself. And, to your point about having this growth mindset and moving forward in your career, maybe what we could do, because I think this is sort of the meat of the whole thing, is kind of shift into, well, that's all interesting, guys. How do I do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we can talk all day about these high lofty ideas, but let's talk about what it really means. And so, before we go into the how, you just brought up this term growth mindset, And so I think just a sort of the connective tissue, using your expression there, between the what are we talking about, what does it take, to all right, now how do we do this, is really kind of cultivating sometimes this term we hear, growth mindset. And
Hmm.
that's really a sense of resilience, if you will, that allows us to embrace change and push our comfort zone. So we talked about some of those practical issues just a few minutes ago. Are you willing to accept a lower pay grade or a lower level? And Bob, you made the point. Someone might say, yes, I'm absolutely ready to do that because other things are more important to me. But to be able to really push through is to have that resilience. Not always easy to do, but if you are, that's when you're able to embrace a challenge, embrace something new, learn from your mistakes, even, and then hopefully develop new skills. But sometimes the reason people are here today, I think, could be all sorts of things. Maybe they lost a job involuntarily, or they've decided I've had enough of something and I want something new. Wherever you are today, we all might be feeling that, gee, I wasn't so good at that last job. Or there's reasons I want to leave that
Yeah.
have to do, they didn't feel like it was a fit. So to
Hmm.
really look at what can I learn from that, and let go of things that might be holding you back.
Well, okay. So this is kind of key to how I think about this stuff.
Yes.
So what I have found are kind of like three dominating emotions that paralyze people
Yeah.
from moving. One is fear, right? I'm afraid. Like I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too much of this, I'm not enough of that. But there's some kind of fear that I can't do this. And even like being aspirational. Like if I said, hey, in 5 years, I would like to be a regional vice president or whatever, the objective would be. But I kind of start to feel like maybe I'm not worthy of a role like that. So there's this fear.
Yeah.
The second big emotion is confusion. Like, guys, you have my full attention. I just have no idea what to do. Like, what's the process here? And then the third one, and I think this is particularly for people that have maybe lost a position, but it could be somebody that's, has a bad boss or a toxic work environment where they're angry, right? And there's just a bunch of bitterness that's kind of accrued. If you knew how badly I got screwed, or it's so unfair what's happened to me,
Yeah.
and this anger, you can really just, it's like a cancer for people. And what you said earlier, I'll pick back up on it, is people, if you're afraid, you don't need to be. Like, you can do this. If you're confused, there's a process. And if you're angry, you kind of need to deal with it and then let it go. Some of the stuff you just have got to let it go to be able to move forward. So your whole point around kind of attitude is sort of the first thing. I just couldn't agree with more.
Yeah, so important. Easy to say, not always easy to do, of course. Fear or self-doubt are very deep-seated,
Yeah.
probably with us our whole lives. And I have to say, all of us have them. There's nothing unique as a human to feel, can I really do this? And these really are very much part of a change. And,
Mm.
by letting them go, there's a lot of motivation, because then you can embrace change.
Yep.
And getting that confidence that you and I both believe is at the cornerstone. We've talked about that a lot, Bob. Getting to that confidence is takes this kind of deep dive work. So I love that we're really just talking about what it really takes, and it can be done. So
Yeah. So kind of, building on that, I know that you're, like to help people develop a plan, to have a process. Um, and I think, one of the things I've learned from you, and we've just sort of touched on this a little bit, but doing that inside work first,
yes,
you know,
absolutely.
can you, anything else to add on that?
Yes, I love this because, like we've been promising, we're going to get into some of that nitty gritty. What do I do? How do I do this? But I often, with my clients, like to start with what I call the inside out approach to getting ready to make a change. And so that's one way we do this work is just a powerful process called visioning. And so we see this up on the screen here, an activity that you can take with you today. We'll put it in chat, and do even, soon or at other times of your life when you feel like you need to take that step back for reflection and really reframe your perspective to get a clearer picture on where you want to go. And so it's can be very powerful. So let's just take a quick look at what I really mean here. So as this tells us on the screen, you're really looking at, imagine it's 6 months from today. You are doing what you wanted to do, or your idea is occurring. So really take a few moments to paint a picture of what you see. And we like to do this in the present, like I am doing this. I am feeling really, really peaceful. I'm feeling satisfied. I feel, I see, I'm with these types of people. I'm with this environment.
Mm.
This is right for me. So when you look at this and have this image conjured up, then take it a little further with the questions I'm prompting you with here when you're doing this on your own. So if you had this, what would you be experiencing? What did you need to embody to successfully accomplish? And then importantly, and this is a great segue into, now what do we need to do? Where do you need to make a change to manifest what you just visualized?
Mm.
And go ahead, Bob.
No, please.
I was going to say, I had a recent experience with a client where we had a very dramatic use of this. She had come to me to help her sort out different offers for jobs. And we went through the first process, logical, what are the costs, the benefits of each? How would this support your career? What can you utilize from your past? And then she made progress, but there was still sort of a hesitancy. So I said, how about if we try a visioning activity? So we did this together. And so after a few minutes of quiet time, she shut her eyes and then came out, and she was energized. I said, what came up for you there? And she said, I shut my eyes and I saw that I wanted to do this job where I'm actually working with my clients versus the job where it was more software measuring client behavior changes and so forth. I still want to be that therapist one-on-one. And it was just like, that was the last piece for her. And this was just a dramatic use of this process. So I really think this is, can be really great for those moments before you really get ready to go into action, which we'll also talk about.
Well, so that you took my first question away from you, which was for me, which was, can you give us an example of where somebody's been able to do that? So thank you, that was cool. The thing that really occurs to me as I'm looking at the screen here is some quiet time for reflection. And, our most precious commodity is time. We have a finite amount of time. And, in my interaction with clients, this is the piece that, they really need to just be able to do exactly what you're saying here. You need to turn everything off. You need to shut the computer, no podcast playing in the background, just somewhere where you can be quiet and actually kind of think and feel for a little bit. And, it doesn't have to be super crazy metaphysical stuff, but just like you say, kind of, but in a sensory way, what are you feeling? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What's it like to be there? I was speaking with a PhD in emotional research a couple of weeks ago, from my background in consumer insights. And we were talking about sadness and where people who are kind of depressed, bummed out, that core emotion is sadness. And I'm like, what's the trick to moving people from sadness, because that's paralyzing, to be able to start making some progress and move forward? And he's like, well, they have to have a vision of what it looks like being happy. And the intersection of sad plus happy, which sounds weird, but the intersection of sad plus happy is yearning. Now I've got a purpose. Now I've got a dream. I've got a reason. I've got a why. Yeah. And so this is a great exercise for helping people start to create that vision of, why am I doing this? Because I'm trying to get there. And there is really attractive to me. That's where I want to be. And can be that catalytic event that gets people moving.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yeah, so important. And Bob and I both just wanted to take a few minutes to really talk about the inner work, and I think this really touches upon that so well. As we now we'll probably talk about what to do, but this is really a great cornerstone.
So one of the words that you and I and Heather, that's good, thank you. So one of the words that you and I really connect on is clarity.
Yes.
Right. And I just did some posts on LinkedIn in the past week or so on clarity, where convictions, and again, that's taking the time and sitting down on what's important and what's not important, prioritizing and kind of really figuring out, what do I want, brings clarity. And then clarity brings confidence. But I know that you've got a lot that you would like to talk about, just on the general topic of clarity and what that looks like for somebody.
Yes, absolutely. We definitely have talked about this a lot, I know. So, right, getting that clarity, it takes some deeper self-discovery. So again, we don't want to present any of this as like, no work at all, easy to do. Any change that's worth doing, any vision that's worth attaining, will take some deep discovery. And so, what this is about now, in terms of shifting it a little bit to, all right, what does this now mean in terms of an actual career, an actual role, or a field, and all that, or whatever it is you're looking to do, is defining what makes you successful so that you can develop your branding. One thing I learned, I work with a lot of mid-career people who might really, yeah, I know I'm good at this. I've had a lot of successes, but can they really put it into really brief messaging to say, here's the value I offer my target audience, whether it's an employer or a client, and this is what it means, so that they can see, oh, here's how you're going to solve my problems. Here's how you can help us or me be successful. Because that's really what it's about. So how do you really get to that sweet spot between what motivates you, what you love to do, and what you're good at doing? And if you really pause for a moment and think about, what does that mean? The motivation and the interest and the energy around something is going to be just as important as that you're good at singing or solving problems or identifying consumer insights. So whatever it is, it's really important to do that kind of work.
So what that reminds me of is, in the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is sort of a staple of the Mount Rushmore of business books. One of the notions that he's got in there is the hedgehog concept. And this is more for companies developing their strategy, but it's completely applicable to people trying to figure out what's next in their career, where do they want to take their career. And he uses 3 circles, and I think you've touched on at least 2 of them. One is, what are we good at? What am I good at? Like, where do I have demonstrable accomplishments, skills, right? It just, when am I doing my best work? What am I doing, right? And so that's kind of maybe more the hard skills, but it could also be soft skills. Like, I'm really good on teams, and I'm good at collaboration, things like that. So that's kind of the first circle. What am I good at? The second one is, what do I care about? Right now, sometimes we talk about dream jobs, or what am I passionate about? I'm going to dial that back just a touch, because again, I think part of this whole reinvention is maybe my work doesn't define me. Like, my work and my worth and my life aren't all synonyms, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh my gosh, this is my dream, or I'm so passionate about ball bearings or hamburgers or whatever. It could be, just something I'm interested in. I care about this. Like, this is a problem, like, I can get motivated to help solve, or a solution that interests me to bring to market. Okay, that's cool. That's the second circle, something you actually are interested in. And then the third circle is, who's hiring, right? Like, where I probably don't want to take that to the old school book publishing business, because that's not a thing, right? Where's the market going? What are the kinds of companies, industries that are rewarding those first 2 circles and have need for something so that I can support my family, support myself, support my family. So, you talk about the sweet spot. What am I good at? What do I care about? How can I support myself? That Venn diagram of those three circles, to me, is a sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That really conjures up a real image of what we're really talking about. And all of them are important. So I don't hear one more important than the other, because you could be really great at something, but can you sell it somewhere? Can you market it? That's the market. So it's the inner work. What are you good at? How are you going to solve problems? But who are you going to solve the problems for? That's the market.
So one of the things that, and I think this is a really practical thing for people that are talking about reinventing themselves, are transferable skills. I know you must come up with that a lot with your clients. Could you talk a little bit about how you help them identify or think about transferable skills?
Yes, that's a really good question, and a lot of people ask about that. That's a very common thing you hear about in webinars or read about. And if you really understand what we mean by that, you're probably going to relax a little bit, because you'll see that you already have them. It's more a matter of understanding what they are and what you have, and then how you can talk about them. A lot of things are really like that.
Mm-hmm.
So really, what they are skills that enable you to do your job, no matter what the actual role or field. They're the skills that are things that you already probably know and have: communication, teamwork, creativity, critical thinking, agility, and it goes on and on. The one that I like to talk about, and something that Bob, you already mentioned in one of your comments earlier, if you have that critical thinking, analytical thinking ability, you can probably solve problems no matter what the context, company, or field, because you're a person that probably is really good at figuring things out, thinking on your feet. So if you can do that, you can, as long as you understand that, you can start talking about it, and how, once you understand the market piece, that third part of that Venn diagram, where can you go and do this? What does the market need and want? You can then, reframe that skill that you already have into that new context. How can you use that to help this new employer or this new field solve their problems?
Yeah, I'm going to jump on the word reframe. I think that's great. Like you said, it's kind of an existing asset that you have. It just needs to be cast in a different light. And where that takes my mind is, if you want to reinvent yourself, and there's kinds of roles or companies that seem appealing to you, then look at the job descriptions for those, or look at people who have those jobs today. How do they talk about, either how does the company in the job posting talk about those kinds of skills? Use their vocabulary. It could be the exact same thing, just needs to kind of be reframed into their vocabulary in a way that the hiring company can understand it. Or, looking at people that are already doing the kinds of roles that you think that you would like to be in, and what are the skill sets that they're sort of identifying in their own background, and go, oh, well, I can do that. I just didn't call it that.
Right.
I'm thinking about a friend who really wanted to be a SaaS software salesperson, and he came more from one nonprofit, and then two, working in a manufacturing, kind of a small to medium-sized manufacturing business. And he wanted to make this leap into SaaS software. Well, the connective tissue was not very apparent. And, I want to save some of his story for another day. But when he was interviewing, and the CRO of that company, the chief revenue officer, was saying, why am I talking to you? Like, there's nothing on your resume that looks like who we talked to. And, we want people with SaaS experience. And my friend's like, well, tell me what that means. What does enterprise SaaS software sales experience mean to you? That means you've called on the highest levels of a company. It's a complex sales cycle. You're asking for this much money. The sales cycle takes this long, whatever the attributes were. And my friend's like, oh, well, I've done all those. I've done that. Here I've done that. Here I've done that. Here I've done that. You just didn't understand my sales cycle in a manufacturing environment. It actually looks very much like the one you're describing in enterprise software. And the guy's like, oh, well, I'm still a doubter, but I'll let you go through. And it had a happy ending. But he was, the candidate needs to take control. It's incumbent upon the candidate to connect those dots for the employer, that these actually are transferable skills. And being passive and hoping somebody else figures it out for you probably isn't the path to success, versus, really kind of doing some of that harder homework, learning the language of the target audience, and then being able to communicate in a way that they can understand.
Absolutely. I think that's just wonderful. And I love this connecting the dots. Clients often have all their dots. They understand their dots, but they just aren't connecting them clearly. The one thing I'll add to what you just said is that kind of telling the story could happen before that job interview too. So you can do that through, you were suggesting, look at other job postings, but also this is a great time to use referral networking. Sometimes it's called informational interviewing. I want to make this change. I have these skills. How do you use these skills in this industry or this role? Understand those things so that they can then communicate that in their written marketing materials, their resume and their LinkedIn profile, and then also at that job interview. So it isn't sort of just something that, oh, yeah, I can do that. Not everyone's going to be really good at just coming up with that on the spot. So do that homework, as you say. And I love that idea about there are ways to find the connective tissues. Just do the groundwork so that you can connect it clearly for someone.
Yeah. So informational interviews, probably a topic worthy of its own LinkedIn Live session on another day, but people will take those calls. There are enough people that if you reach out to them on LinkedIn or email, that will take those calls. So, kind of a theme for me, Susan, what I'm hearing is like, to be able to reinvent takes time. And, both on my kind of values, what are my kind of convictions, and then the clarity that comes from that. Yeah. But then also the discovery on what's the marketplace want and how does the marketplace talk about it. And then, working with somebody like you to help bridge that gap so that it can be communicated effectively.
Yes.
Hang on. We've got a question here from my good friend, Dave Buisson. Hi, what are some things you can do to get to the point with recruiters or hiring managers to get the chance to connect the dots? So I can take a shot at that.
But, yeah, please.
Okay. So Dave, good to see you, by the way. Thank you. Susan was already kind of hinting at some of this, which is, when you need some target companies, or at least a target idea of what you're looking for, in this reinvention. Then, whether it is on LinkedIn, obviously Career Club, has data assets that you can use to identify the kinds of companies, right? Then there's again, this is all not easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it, or we'd all just be getting jobs by applying online. But, Dave, like reaching out to the hiring manager, and saying, hey, I see you guys are doing this. My background is this. I think there's some connectivity here. Can we talk? But honestly, I really believe that's the execution part. The at least as important part is getting your story straight and then knowing what they're looking for. So like you're talking about recruiters, they've got a pretty literal understanding of what's being looked for sometimes. They have the job description that was given to them, and that's their script that they need to follow. And if you're not on board with that, the recruiter may struggle with understanding those things. But for me, Dave, I got to know my value proposition first. I have to be able to communicate that effectively. I need to understand who's a likely buyer for that value proposition, and then do the homework, whether, again, it's, using a tool like Career Club, complementing it with LinkedIn, just using LinkedIn in your existing network, but it's the ability to reach out. And I think too that if you're still kind of feeling your way out or you're not confident in your message, informational interviews can be a really powerful tool to kind of help you clean that up so that you're not going, hey, I think I want this job. It's more like, hey, I'm just trying to learn and understand, does this make sense to you? Could you see something like this working at your company? And again, recruiters may not take your call in that context because they're busy trying to fill jobs. A hiring manager, if you can get to them, enough of them will take your call. They've got a bunch of openings that they're trying to fill. And I think that would be an effect, but you have to have your message developed first, or else it's all kind of for naught. Dave Alto, if you need to up your game on LinkedIn Job Seeker, Dave's got some great stuff. He's awesome on LinkedIn. I can definitely recommend Dave. And then also sort of suggesting that messaging people in the job at the company. Yeah. So one is to learn, but then two, also to get the referrals from them. That's a great call out, David. Anything, what else would you add to this, Susan, in your experience?
Yeah, everything you're saying, I'm completely on board with, as usual, Bob. And just to add, just to revisit this idea of connect the dots first, then you can tell your story more clearly in your written materials. And on LinkedIn, that's probably where that recruiter will find you.
Yep.
But I'm more about attracting the hiring manager. The recruiter is working in boxes, and unless you fit that neatly, they're not going to be interested in you as much. Their job is to sell. So the hiring manager is the person typically we want to reach. Do it with your LinkedIn messaging. How are you talking about yourself? Do you have those branding keywords that field, company, or role is going to be looking for, and the ones that align to that job description? Then you're connecting the dots to your question there so that you'll have a chance to do that in person. Yep. That's the trick. Get them to want to reach out to you.
That's a great question. So I'm just trying to be mindful of our time here. So Susan, maybe to kind of start wrapping this up a little bit.
Sure.
Yikes. If you needed to give somebody maybe kind of like, I don't know, an arbitrary number, but kind of like 3 talking points to really kind of think about reinventing themselves, pivoting through reinvention, what would sort of your 3 dots be?
I would say start at the beginning. Besides just, start with where you're at today in terms of the visioning. But in terms of steps to take, look at your past achievements and use those to understand how you're successful in the past and what that means going forward. Your achievements will give you all sorts of information. So after you figure out what are the things I'm most proud of, look at the skills and the qualities that it took for you to get that success. So that's one of my top things that I do all the time in my practice. From there, we just get so much material to work with. That's going to give you a lot of information about your skills and so forth. I would say the other thing is my next bullet point, so to speak, would be to take time for that discovery period. Don't rush it, because you really want to make the best out of every opportunity you have to talk to somebody, whether it is informational interviewing, referral networking, conversation, or job. So do the homework so that you come out of the gate really clear. Here's what I have to offer, that value branding statement we talked about, and here's how I can help you. You've already done that work to reframe, your skills. And I would say utilize your network to access target companies and to access hidden jobs. Bob, a few minutes ago, you said that hiring manager probably has a lot of jobs to fill. A lot of those might not be posted. And so they have a need. And so your role is, I know how I can help this kind of company or the industry with their needs, how to solve them, but to have that hiring manager see you as somebody that could help them and something that he hasn't even, or she hasn't had time to post and clarify in the job description.
Yep. No, I love it. That's awesome. So, the bow that I would put on top of all that is, working with somebody like you, Susan, that can actually help them take them through a process. It's my experience that doing this do it yourself, doesn't always work. It's good to have an objective, trained eye helping you do that. If people wanted to contact you, Susan, or learn more about what you do, how would they do that?
Yeah, so people can find me on LinkedIn, Susan Barbee, or Grow Forward Coaching, or they can go on my website, Grow Forward Coaching, goforward-coach at gmail.com.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Susan, thank you so much. I knew this would be fun, and I knew that it would be very informative. I hope everybody enjoyed this. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for the comments and just investing a few minutes of your time. And, it's our sincere hope that, taking in this kind of wisdom that Susan's been able to share with you today can help folks, really pivot and make sure that whatever your work is, that your work matters to you. So with that, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for coming, everyone. We hope you come away with something that you can really put into action immediately.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.